She hadn't spoken a word in years. Doctors called it a disorder, specialists declared her broken, and her wealthy father resigned himself to a future where his little girl would remain silent forever. But one night, everything changed. A soft melody echoed from the nursery, a child's voice rising like a miracle, singing fluently in a language no one thought she understood. And beside her sat the nanny her father dismissed as unqualified, guiding her gently, unlocking what money and experts never could. When the father burst through the doorway, what he witnessed didn't just shake his beliefs, it shattered the world he had built on prejudice and pride. How could a woman he underestimated succeed where the best professionals had failed? And what he did next would decide not just his daughter's future, but his own. Naomi Carter never expected her life to revolve around silence. At 28, she had taken job after job in wealthy households across Manhattan, always labeled as just a help. Always underestimated despite years of study and quiet resilience. Her current position was no different, caring for the daughter of a powerful millionaire who believed problems could be solved only with money and prestige. The girl, Elise, was 6 years old and had not spoken a word in more than 2 years. Therapists cycled in and out of the mansion, each one leaving behind reports filled with complex terms and little progress. To her father, Elise was a failed investment, a reminder of imperfection in a world where appearances meant everything. Naomi noticed what the specialists missed. Elise's eyes sparkled when music played, her fingers tapped out rhythms on the table, her lips almost moved when melodies filled the air. There was a voice hidden inside her, waiting for someone patient enough to listen. Naomi had no idea that one quiet evening, that hidden voice would burst forth in a way that could not be ignored, and it would set off a storm that would change everything. Naomi quickly learned that Elise's silence was not emptiness but resistance. Each day in the mansion followed the same routine, expensive tutors arriving with flashcards, therapists carrying charts, and Elise shrinking deeper into herself. Her father, Victor Langford, dismissed every failure with a cold wave of his hand. To him, Elise was defective, and Naomi, hired at a lower rate than the prestigious agencies, was a placeholder, nothing more. But in the quiet moments between lessons, Naomi noticed what others overlooked. Elise hummed faint melodies under her breath, traced piano keys on the edge of her desk, and mouthed words from the French storybooks Naomi read aloud. Slowly, Naomi began weaving music into their days, soft piano notes, gentle songs, and stories told with rhythm instead of pressure. Elise responded like a flower turning towards sunlight. Then came the night everything changed. Naomi sat at the piano, playing a lullaby she remembered from her own childhood. Elise crept beside her, eyes wide, and without warning began to sing. Her voice was fragile but clear, every syllable in perfect French. Naomi's heart pounded. For the first time in years, the silence was broken, not by therapy, not by money, but by trust. The joy lasted only seconds. Victor appeared in the doorway, his voice slicing through the music like a blade. His daughter froze, terror flooding her face, as if she'd been caught committing a crime. Victor demanded answers, his anger directed not at himself or the specialists who had failed, but at Naomi. How could a woman he saw as unqualified, as less, succeed where the city's best doctors had failed? From that moment, Naomi became his target. The following days turned into a quiet war. Tasks multiplied, scrubbing floors outside her duties, long hours without rest, endless criticisms whispered loudly enough for Elise to hear. "You're just a nanny," Victor sneered one morning, ensuring staff nearby would catch his words. "Don't mistake luck for talent." Naomi stayed calm, but Elise's world began to collapse again. She was locked out of music lessons, her books replaced with rigid therapy manuals, her moments with Naomi monitored like contraband. Still, Elise clung tighter to the one person who treated her as more than a broken project. One evening, Elise slipped Naomi a folded note written in careful block letters. "Don't leave me. You're the only one who listens." Naomi tucked it into her pocket, her resolve hardening. She knew the price of speaking up in households like this: silence bought with money, reputations protected at all costs. Yet she also knew Elise's fragile progress could vanish if she surrendered now. Victor's punishments escalated. When Naomi tried to advocate for Elise, he accused her of manipulation. When Elise begged for Naomi to stay, he dismissed it as confusion. And when Naomi mentioned that Elise was not only speaking but demonstrating advanced intelligence, Victor laughed in her face. "Do you expect me to believe a mute child is gifted?" The words stung more than the dismissal itself. Naomi had studied child psychology. She recognized Elise's brilliance, but to Victor, her qualifications were irrelevant. What mattered was appearance, and in his world, a wealthy white man's authority outweighed the expertise of a black woman he considered disposable. Each insult was meant to silence Naomi, but instead, it fueled her determination. She began documenting Elise's words, her songs, her drawings, proof that could not be denied. Every evening after Elise went to bed, Naomi recorded her progress in notebooks, capturing the truth before it could be erased. The mansion had turned into a cage, and Victor tightened the bars with every passing day. But Naomi understood something he did not. The more he tried to control the narrative, the closer he came to exposing his own blindness. Elise's voice had already broken free once. The question was not whether it would happen again, it was when, and what would happen when the world finally heard it. And when that moment arrived, it would not just shake a household. It would shake Victor Langford's entire world. The breaking point came on a stormy evening, when Victor Langford gathered a room full of investors and family friends in his mansion's grand hall. He wanted to prove control, to showcase order in his world of wealth. Elise was paraded in front of them, silent as always, her head lowered under the heavy gaze of her father. To Victor, she was an accessory, an image to maintain, not a child to be understood. But Naomi knew the truth. Hidden in her pocket was a small recorder, filled with hours of Elise's songs, fluent conversations in multiple languages, and stories that revealed a gifted mind trapped beneath her father's prejudice. For weeks, Naomi had hesitated, torn between protecting her job and protecting the girl. But as she watched Victor smile coldly while Elise shrank back in fear, she realized the moment had come. When the guests applauded Victor's speech about sacrifice and perseverance, Naomi stepped forward. Calm, steady, but with a fire in her eyes, she pressed play. The room filled not with Victor's voice, but Elise's. Clear, melodic, undeniable. A 6-year-old child singing in flawless French, then shifting seamlessly into Italian, her words rich with meaning, her tone filled with life. The guests froze. Forks clinked against plates. Every head turned, not to Victor, but to Elise. The girl who had been called mute, defective, broken. Victor's face turned crimson. "Turn that off!" he thundered, lunging toward Naomi. But she didn't flinch. The next recording began, Elise's small voice explaining. "Daddy talks about me as if I can't hear. He tells doctors I'm a lost cause. But I understand everything. I just don't talk to people who don't listen." The silence that followed was suffocating. Investors exchanged shocked looks. A family friend whispered under their breath. And Elise, trembling at first, stepped forward. For the first time in public, she lifted her head and spoke, not in song, not in whispers, but in a clear, unwavering voice. "I'm not broken. I just wanted my dad to see me." The words shattered the carefully constructed image Victor had built. His empire of denial crumbled in front of an audience he could not control. He grabbed at excuses, blaming Naomi, accusing her of manipulation, insisting the recordings were tricks. But every desperate word only dug his grave deeper. The guests had heard Elise themselves. The evidence was undeniable. Naomi felt her heart pound as Victor's anger boiled over. He stepped toward her, towering, fists clenched. For a moment, the room held its breath. Would he lash out? Would power and arrogance erupt into violence? Naomi met his gaze without flinching, her calm presence a shield stronger than wealth or threats. And in that instant, everyone watching saw the truth. The millionaire who claimed to protect his daughter was the same man silencing her. And the woman he dismissed as just a nanny was the only one who had truly listened. Elise stood at Naomi's side, clutching her hand. The guests whispered louder now, words like genius, abuse, cover up. Phones came out, cameras clicked. Victor's world was unraveling, not in private, but in the most public, humiliating way possible. The man who once believed money could bury the truth now faced the reality that it had been living under his own roof all along. And as Naomi shut off the recorder, letting silence reclaim the hall, one question echoed in every mind present. Would Victor finally open his eyes to the daughter he had ignored? Or would his pride destroy the last chance he had to be her father? The fallout from that night rippled far beyond the walls of Victor Langford's mansion. The recordings spread quickly, shared first among the guests and then across social circles that thrived on reputation and secrecy. In less than 24 hours, the carefully curated image of a powerful millionaire shattered, replaced by headlines about neglect, prejudice, and the extraordinary child whose brilliance had been silenced. For Elise, the impact was immediate. No longer confined to a shadow of silence, she was enrolled in a gifted program where her talents were nurtured rather than dismissed. Her voice, once hidden, now filled classrooms, music halls, and auditoriums. She flourished not because money finally unlocked her potential, but because someone had dared to listen when it mattered most. Naomi, once underestimated as just a nanny, became recognized as the person who had uncovered the truth. Universities and advocacy groups invited her to speak. Parents reached out, asking how many children had been written off simply because their voices didn't fit the mold society demanded. What Victor had tried to bury turned into a platform Naomi used to fight for others like Elise, children silenced by bias, by neglect, by prejudice. Victor himself faced consequences no fortune could shield him from. Business partners distanced themselves, investors questioned his judgment, and for the first time, the man who believed money solved everything had to confront the reality that his pride had nearly destroyed his daughter. Whether he learned humility or not remained uncertain, but one truth was clear: the world now knew the story he tried so hard to hide. The deeper meaning was undeniable. Elise's journey was not just about one child's voice. It was about the countless children dismissed, underestimated, and silenced because of the color of their skin, their background, or the biases of those in power. It was about the workers like Naomi, undervalued and overlooked, who hold the keys to change, but are ignored until their courage forces the world to pay attention. Racism is not always shouted in the streets. Sometimes it hides in polished homes and professional reports, disguised as expertise, reinforced by wealth. And yet, it can be undone by something as simple, and as powerful, as listening. Elise's story forces us to ask, how many other voices are waiting in silence, not because they cannot speak, but because no one has cared enough to hear them? How many gifted children are lost to prejudice, written off as problems instead of recognized as treasures? Naomi proved that true change begins not with money or titles, but with dignity, patience, and belief. She showed that even in the face of arrogance and injustice, quiet truth can rise louder than any lie. So as we close this story, the challenge is no longer about Victor Langford, Naomi Carter, or Elise. It is about us. Will we keep allowing bias to dictate whose voices matter? Or will we finally choose to listen, to see every child, every person, as more than the labels imposed on them? Because sometimes the most extraordinary truths are hidden not in silence, but in the spaces where someone is waiting for us to hear them. And the question is, are we listening?